Remember a time when you reveled in a success? Doesn't matter if others thought it was great, you knew it was. You were affirmed because you knew you'd done a phenomenal job. You received a promotion or finished a complicated project ahead of schedule, or you graduated with a degree you always dreamed of, or one of your children told you what a great parent you are. Remember that? You couldn't quit talking about it, thinking about it, and long after others had forgotten, you kept thinking back of that. What an achievement. Somehow you thought that things would just keep going uphill from there, either on a steep or at least a gradual upward trajectory. Am I right? How did you take it the next time you realized that things weren't as straightforward as you thought? Or maybe you wondered whether what happened back there really was accurate, or whether you just remembered everything through the color of nostalgia. If things declined rapidly, maybe you could relate to the opening words of Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. Now, we never tire of returning to those best of times, but we do struggle with the worst of times. I imagine Jesus may have entertained similar thoughts after his baptism, which was recorded just before that text that Chad read. That was a high, surrounded by people who were in awe of him. After all, John had told his followers about how beyond description this person who would come after him would be. And here he was, young, charismatic. Even a voice from heaven had affirmed that he was something else. The atmosphere was electric. He was ready to move some things, and goodness knew they needed it. Can you feel and see that? It was the best of times. Do you think Jesus suspected that there might be something different up ahead? Well, there sure was. The Spirit of God, not an enemy or an adversary or a nemesis, no, the Spirit took Jesus a different route. He entered the desert alone, isolated. No banquet of celebration after the Jordan River. In fact, he didn't have anything to eat at all for a full 40 days. And during those long weeks, Jesus had some real moments. If any of you have read Brené Brown's work, you will know that she is a proponent of knowing yourself and learning why you do certain things. I mean, really knowing yourself. If anyone can shed light on hidden agenda, this researcher, social work expert, professor can. Brené knows what kinds of demons haunt us in the dark, in isolation, at vulnerable moments when our reserves are low. Jesus was catapulted right into all of that after the high of that kickstart of his public ministry. So what did the Spirit point out about his potential demons or the things that could haunt him moving forward? What is more basic to human life than our own needs, and specifically our need for food? That's a given. It's pretty much a basic drive, and in our country, in a middle-class environment, we consider being well-fed to be essential. I mean, what can you even do on an empty stomach, right? Anything above that bare minimum, like exquisite cuisine, quality products, extravagant self-care, can easily be rationalized. And what we need and want, we want now. Now, I'm not talking about the need for self-care, for having grace with ourselves, getting the rest we need, acknowledging what we feel and what we think, taking care of body, soul, and spirit. That is very different than self-indulgence to the exclusion of others without thought for the greater good. Our culture has perfected the immediacy cult. We do not wait well. If a lineup is too long, we complain or we storm out. If we can't have an answer now, well, don't bother. Get it and get it fast. Do it and don't delay. Some of you might know what it means to be hungry. I mean, really hungry. Those who have experienced a life that is less than luxurious. Our fellow citizens who experience homelessness feel this routinely. But others of us, probably not so much. We grab something quickly at the first hint of hunger. But what Jesus experienced in the desert when he was pressed to take action and feed his body is really not about food. It's about making sure that his needs are met and met quickly. And it's about noticing what happens when we are in a compromised and vulnerable position. Inevitably, we will be tempted to go beyond what we know is where we should be and what we should do. Maybe Jesus wasn't all that excited about having no food for 40 days. Maybe he would have preferred to sidestep the desert and rather opt for that elaborate celebration after his baptism. Maybe so. But here he was at the end of 40 days and he was hungry. When you're hungry, your physical strength wanes. There will come rationalizations offered in our vulnerable and weakened moments. If you really are the one whom God finds pleasing, why not turn this stone into bread? I mean, what can it hurt? No one is out here to see it. It's not like you have to worry about hidden security cameras or paparazzi. It sure would be great to have some of that sourdough right about now. A small thing, massive ramifications. This was an invitation for Jesus to dig deeply, to know what can happen when you land in a place you're not prepared for. These 40 days had been preparation, and after that, Jesus passed this first test. But the lesson isn't over. As far as we know, Jesus hadn't regained his strength. He hadn't eaten anything. He hadn't rested. And here comes the second zinger. Notice how the text says he was taken higher up. When he imagined himself rising to a higher level, he was shown power. Power. In order to access prestige and power, simply divert your attention to the dark side instead of continuing the course you've been called to or given to do. The rewards will blow your mind. Glory, a following. You'll be in a position from which to dominate. It's not that hard. Just move your attention to something boring, foreign, compromising, ultimately evil. Sure, you've just had that experience of affirmation at the Jordan River, but that was small. You can do a whole lot better than that. Reach for something much bigger. Make a name for yourself. If we've been attentive, we have seen this play out before our very eyes on our political stage. We have seen people, many people, who just a few short years ago appeared to uphold basic decency and were committed to the law and to democracy. And within a very brief period of time, they moved their attention to something alluring, something radically different, something exciting that promised power quickly, something foreign and dark. And we now see the result. This is what happens when we don't pay attention. This is what happens when we have not been adequately prepared, when we don't pay attention to history, when we personally have not grown with the demands of our position, when we don't understand the times in which we live. These became the worst of times. This doesn't only happen to politicians. It doesn't only happen to those in high-profile positions. This very same invitation to consider something foreign is presented to us regularly. Again, it's presented as something innocuous, something that will benefit us, make us look better, give us more access, if only we tweak what we've adhered to until now. If only we will entertain the benefits of accessing the dark side, the allure of power. Power is a drug, and not one of us is immune. What we can safely turn our attention to is investing in our own preparation for the tasks ahead, even if those tasks are still pretty vague in our minds. Investing in our core, spiritually, mentally, intellectually, emotionally. This happens with daily practice. We never graduate, but we always progress. This was another invitation for Jesus to dig deeply, to choose intentionally. And he was prepared. He had not wasted his 40 days of isolation. And you'd think that would have been enough. Can't I catch a break? What is all this? This does not seem like the best of times. No, the preparations can feel relentless. In hindsight, we can see that Jesus' mission was enormous. So we can understand that his rigorous preparation was necessary given his profound calling. Ironically, then, Jesus is taken to the center of religious life, the temple. This is not surprising because we heard last week from Aravis and Rossi that he spent a lot of time around religious folk, beginning with age 12. And here Jesus is ushered up to the highest point of religious life, the temple, the highest place, a place where he could observe everything, a place of vision and insight. If power couldn't capture his attention, maybe stardom will. Throw yourself down from the very tip of that temple, Jesus is told, and nothing will happen to you. You won't even stumble on a stone because God will take care of you. Imagine how news will travel if you prove you were sent by God. That kind of a demonstration, you would show you were above the laws of nature. Incredible. Don't we see that kind of thing today? Exactly that kind of thing? Think of how many followers you would have. Think if you did this publicly, Jesus, in broad daylight, when everyone can see you. And we see it too, in the heart of the religious establishment on a daily basis. People claiming that they can defy the laws of nature and nothing will happen to them. The parallel to this biblical story is grim. You don't have to listen to the advice of science, they say. You don't have to follow the advice of professionals. In fact, speak loudly and forcefully from whatever platform you're given. Sunday morning, social media, in-person, indoor rallies for worship. Do it all because God will take care of you. I don't say this lightly. I am grieved by the attitudes of many people loudly purporting to be Christian and with their actions are making the world a more treacherous place. If Jesus had thrown himself down from that highest point of the temple and been killed, the ramifications would have been immeasurable. The same is true for those who recklessly gamble with human life today, simply because of the lure of stardom. Jesus' response here is so chilling, given what we are experiencing. Do not put God to the test. We say the same thing. Do not put God to the test by defying laws of nature, by elevating ourselves to places we have not been prepared for, by risking everything. For what? Every risk we take endangers another person's life, has consequences. It may be criminal. Putting others' lives at risk while building a religious platform and empire is putting God to the test. So finally, Jesus is released from his brutal examination of 40 days. Before the desert experience, our text states, Jesus returned from the Jordan filled by the Holy Spirit. After the desert experience, the next verse reads, Jesus returned in the power of the Spirit. This is the difference preparation makes. This is what happens when someone takes the time to work through potential pitfalls that are universal. It's what each intentional one of us experiences and is up against. The goal is to move from being filled to being empowered. In other words, from being given a chance to being equipped to live and lead with integrity. This power of the Spirit allowed Jesus to meet what lay ahead of him head on. And the following verses, we read what that was. He announced his mission to the religious establishment and pretty much got thrown off the cliff for that, or at least almost. He responded to people having severe episodes of mental illness. He healed people whose bodies were sick. He called on his fellow followers as they navigated. He helped them navigate their professional hurdles. You can read all about it in the remaining verses of Luke 4. As we consider this story, what does it have to do with us? First of all, I immediately thought about the forced isolation and what a poignant parallel that is to where we find ourselves today. This time feels like a desert. And though we have physical food, we somehow feel famished, not even sure what we truly crave. In our craving for something, bread, have we become demanding our needs be met and met quickly? Or have we learned more patience, determined to embrace the discomfort, to learn more patience, to embrace the uncertainty, to embrace the added strain on ourselves, on our families, our communities, and our congregation? Have we grown in our ability to recognize the points in which we are vulnerable and weakened? And when we are, to raise our level of watchfulness when reacting or making decisions. We are a self-protecting species, and we will easily rationalize. Learn to question rationalization. What happens when we are affirmed or promoted? When we reach a new level? Do we ever imagine ourselves reaching a new level and think about what that might look like? Invariably, there will be a lure toward power. That is universal. How quickly do we notice when there is a slight shift away from the values and the calling and the character that we've always cultivated? How quickly do we notice when that lure gets the better of us? It might be a small shift, but it is a small shift to the dark side. This doesn't only happen to politicians or those in high-profile positions. Not one of us is immune. I'm not. You're not. We as a culture, as a community, as a congregation, we are not immune. Are we prepared? How can we be more prepared? How can we safely invest in our preparation and resiliency? We need to. Where are we in danger of turning to the dark side? Center of our religious life. Maybe our weakness isn't turning our back on science. If not, then what is it? We have our blind spots. Where are our vulnerabilities? Are we prepared for what's ahead? Whether that's later today, later this month, later this year. In Brian McLaren's book, Road by Walking, he makes a statement which reads like this: to never be given a chance to succeed, that's a tragedy. But in some ways, it's even worse to have your chance and not be ready for it. Preparation, understanding. This requires investing in daily practices from which we never graduate, but are always progressing. These are components leading to our resiliency, all a part of what we try to foster in our congregation. There is a reason we do things. It is not random. And yet, all the spiritual, mental, emotional work in the world will never isolate us from the upheavals and challenges that we face, but it will prepare us. Resiliency won't eradicate sorrow, but we will have heartwarming joy too. Frustrations will always accompany us, even as we learn to let go. Our serious doubts may intensify while we resolve to hold on to what we know to be solid. Throughout his life, Jesus faced other situations where he really could have turned to the dark side. He was never finished, but he had prepared. So Charles Dickens' words do ring true. We will have the best of times and the worst of times. And usually we will experience them simultaneously. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief. It was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. We had everything before us. We had nothing before us. We were all going direct to heaven. We were all going direct the other way. End quote. Are we prepared? May we be